The scent of lilies filled the cathedral like a cloying perfume, each breath making my stomach turn. My hands trembled as I clutched the bouquet of white roses, their thorns hidden beneath silk ribbon that matched the lace of my wedding dress. A dress I'd never chosen. A wedding I'd never wanted. A man I'd never met until 3 days ago. Through the veil's gauze, I could see my reflection in the polished marble floor. A ghost in white, walking toward an ending disguised as a beginning. The organ music swelled, each note feeling like a countdown to my execution. My father's grip on my arm was bruising, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks I'd hide for days. "Walk," he hissed, his breath reeking of whiskey and desperation. The same whiskey that had led him to lose everything at the poker tables. The same addiction that had turned his daughter into currency. A debt to be paid to the most dangerous man in New York. I forced my feet to move, one white satin heel in front of the other. Each step echoed in the cavernous space, announcing my surrender to hundreds of watching eyes. The aisle stretched before me like a tunnel with no exit, lined with pews packed with men in expensive suits and women dripping in diamonds. This wasn't a celebration. It was a coronation of sorts. Sebastian Russo claiming his prize. At the end of that endless aisle stood my future. Sebastian Russo, perfectly still, watching me approach with those cold gray eyes that revealed nothing. He was devastatingly handsome. I'd give him that much. Tall, perhaps 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his custom black tuxedo perfectly. His dark hair was swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved by an angry god. All sharp angles and brutal beauty, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, straight nose that had probably been broken more than once. Lips pressed into a thin line that suggested he found this entire ceremony as distasteful as I did. But it was his eyes that truly terrified me. Storm gray and utterly emotionless, they watched me approach like a predator assessing prey. Not with lust or even mild interest, just cold calculation. I was a business transaction, nothing more. My father released my arm when we reached the altar, practically shoving me toward Sebastian. I stumbled slightly in my heels, and Sebastian's hand shot out, catching my elbow with surprising speed. His touch was firm, impersonal, steadying me the way one might right a falling vase. When I dared to look up at his face, searching for any hint of the man beneath the monster, I found nothing. No warmth, no reassurance. Just that same cold assessment. The priest began speaking in Latin, words I didn't understand, rituals that felt ancient and binding. I went through the motions in a daze, repeating vows that felt like chains wrapping around my throat, promising to love, honor, and obey a man who looked at me like I was a piece of furniture he'd recently acquired. When it came time for the rings, Sebastian took my trembling hand in his much larger one. His skin was warm, calloused in ways that suggested violence rather than honest labor. He slid a ring onto my finger, a massive emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught the cathedral's light and scattered it like green fire. The band was platinum, heavy, engraved with something in Italian I couldn't read. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest intoned, his voice echoing off vaulted ceilings. "You may kiss your bride." Sebastian's hands framed my face with surprising gentleness, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones in a gesture that might have been tender, if not for the complete absence of emotion in his eyes. He lifted my veil slowly, deliberately, giving the photographers time to capture the moment. Then he leaned down and kissed me. It was brief, controlled. His lips pressed against mine with the clinical precision of a man checking off a box on a contract. There was no passion, no promise, no hint that this kiss meant anything beyond the fulfillment of a ceremony. When he pulled back, I felt more alone than I had before he'd touched me. The cathedral erupted in applause, but the sound felt distant, underwater. I was drowning in the reality of what I'd just done. Mrs. Sebastian Russo. The name felt foreign, like a costume that didn't fit, like someone else's identity I'd been forced to wear. Sebastian tucked my hand into the crook of his arm, his grip firm but not painful, and led me back down the aisle. Cameras flashed, people smiled, and I felt myself disappearing with each step, becoming less Sienna Caldwell and more Mrs. Russo. A title, a possession, a thing rather than a person. The reception was held at Sebastian's estate on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling mansion that looked like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and iron and imposing grandeur, surrounded by walls that seemed designed more to keep people in than to keep threats out. The ballroom where we'd celebrate was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, walls hung with art that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. I sat beside Sebastian at the head table, a fixed smile plastered on my face, accepting congratulations from an endless parade of strangers. Men who looked at me with calculating interest. Women who assessed me with barely concealed disdain. Everyone trying to figure out my worth, my purpose, my place in Sebastian's world. Sebastian barely acknowledged me. He spoke with his men, Marco, his second in command, a man with hard eyes and scarred knuckles, and Angelo, his consigliere, older with silver in his hair and a sharp intelligence in his gaze. They conversed in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow, discussing things I wasn't meant to understand. Occasionally, Sebastian's hand would rest on my lower back or my shoulder, public displays of possession that meant nothing in private. I picked at the elaborate meal, course after course of food I couldn't taste, wine I didn't dare drink. My throat was too tight, my stomach too knotted with anxiety and grief for the life I'd just lost. "You should eat," Sebastian said quietly, the first words he'd spoken directly to me since the ceremony. "You're too thin." It wasn't concern. It was criticism, an observation that his new acquisition needed maintenance. I set down my fork, unable to force another bite past my lips. The dancing began as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sebastian stood, offering me his hand with the same cold courtesy he'd shown all day. "We have an audience," he said. "We dance." I placed my hand in his, and he led me onto the marble floor. A waltz began, something classical I didn't recognize. Sebastian's hand settled at my waist, pulling me closer than was strictly proper, his other hand engulfing mine. We moved together with mechanical precision, his body leading, mine following in a dance we'd never practiced, but somehow executed flawlessly. "There are rules," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear over the music. His breath was warm against my ear, his cologne, bergamot and cedar, filling my senses. "You'll learn them quickly if you're smart." "What kind of rules?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't leave the estate without my permission or my men accompanying you. You don't speak to my associates unless I'm present. You don't ask questions about my business. You don't involve yourself in matters that don't concern you." His gray eyes bored into mine, and I saw something dark and dangerous in their depths. "You're my wife now, Sienna. That means you exist in my world on my terms. You're mine to protect, mine to provide for, and mine to control." The bluntness of it stole my breath. "I didn't choose this." "No," he agreed, his expression unchanging. "But your father chose for you when he sat down at my table with debts he couldn't pay, and I chose to accept his offer rather than take his life. You should be grateful for that, at least." "Grateful?" Anger flickered through the numbness. "You bought me like property." "I acquired you as settlement of a debt," he corrected, spinning me in a turn that made my dress flare around my legs. "There's a difference. Property has no rights. You, as my wife, have the protection of my name, the security of my wealth, and the privilege of my household. That's more than most women in your position could hope for. What about love, partnership, respect?" His laugh was cold, devoid of humor. Love is a fairy tale for children. Partnership requires trust, which neither of us has. Respect is earned, not given. What we have is a contract, Sienna. I've upheld my end. I've married you, given you my name, brought you into my home. You'll uphold yours by being the wife I require. Obedient, discreet, invisible when necessary. The dance ended. He released me immediately, stepping back as though I'd burned him. Then he returned to his men, resuming a conversation in Italian as though I'd already ceased to exist. I spent the rest of the reception invisible despite being the bride, a ghost in a white dress, smiling when required, accepting congratulations I didn't want from people I'd never see again. Women I didn't know congratulated me with false warmth, their eyes cataloging my dress, my jewelry, my worth. Men assessed me with calculating gazes, trying to determine what advantage my presence in Sebastian's life might offer them. Through it all, Sebastian ignored me completely, absorbed in conversations I wasn't privy to, making decisions about things I'd never understand. I was an accessory, a trophy displayed but not valued. It was nearly midnight when he finally approached me again. His jacket discarded somewhere, his tie loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked slightly disheveled in a way that made him even more dangerously attractive. "It's time to leave," he said, not asking if I was ready, simply informing me of the decision he'd made. I followed him to a black SUV waiting in the circular drive, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Marco drove, another man I didn't recognize, younger, with a scar across his cheek, sat in the passenger seat. Both armed, I noticed, catching glimpses of shoulder holsters beneath their suit jackets. Sebastian sat beside me in the back, immediately pulling out his phone and scrolling through messages that were apparently more interesting than his new bride. The leather seat was soft, the interior smelling of expensive materials, and that same cologne Sebastian wore. I pressed myself against the door, trying to maintain distance in the confined space. The estate we arrived at was different from the one where we'd held the reception. Larger, more isolated, surrounded by high stone walls topped with what looked like cameras and sensors. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their presence a reminder that Sebastian's world was one of constant threat and necessary protection. Home. The word felt wrong. Prison felt more accurate. "Marco will show you to your room," Sebastian said, as we entered through massive front doors into a foyer that screamed wealth and power. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost 6 figures, original artwork on the walls. "Don't wait up. Your room, not our room." The message was clear. This marriage might be legal, but it would be one in name only. Marco led me through endless hallways, up a sweeping staircase, down another corridor to a bedroom that was beautiful in its impersonal luxury. Like an expensive hotel room, cream and gold decor, a massive 4-poster bed with linens that probably had a thread count I couldn't imagine, windows that overlooked darkened gardens. My belongings, the few things I'd been allowed to bring from my father's house, were already unpacked and put away by invisible hands. My clothes hung in a walk-in closet beside evening gowns I'd never chosen, shoes I'd never picked, jewelry I'd never wanted. "If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed," Marco said, his voice gruff but not unkind. He seemed uncomfortable with this role, escorting a reluctant bride to her lonely room. "Mrs. Caruso, the housekeeper, will be available in the morning. She'll explain the household routines." Then I was alone. I stood in the center of that beautiful room, still wearing my wedding dress, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. I'd been sold. Married off to settle my father's debts to a man who looked at me with less warmth than one might show a piece of furniture. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs finally giving out, and let the tears come, silent sobs that I muffled with my hand, terrified that someone might hear, that showing weakness might make things worse. My mascara ran in black streams down my face, ruining the professional makeup job that had made me look like I belonged in Sebastian's world. I cried for the life I'd lost, my dreams of finishing college, of becoming a teacher, of maybe someday finding someone who loved me. I cried for my mother, dead 3 years now, who would have fought to prevent this. I cried for myself, 23 years old and trapped in a marriage to a monster who'd made it clear I meant nothing to him. Eventually, exhaustion won. I must have fallen asleep because I woke to gray morning light filtering through curtains I didn't remember closing. Someone had removed my shoes and covered me with a blanket, a small kindness that made my chest ache. I was still wearing my wedding dress, now hopelessly wrinkled. I found an ensuite bathroom that was larger than my bedroom had been at my father's house. All marble and gold fixtures, a shower with multiple heads, a tub deep enough to swim in. I peeled off my wedding dress with trembling fingers, letting it pool on the floor like a discarded skin, and stepped into the shower. The water was hot, almost scalding, and I stood under it until my skin turned pink, trying to wash away the feeling of Sebastian's hands on me, the memory of that cold kiss, the reality of what my life had become. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel soft enough to be criminal, I found breakfast waiting on a tray. Coffee, fruit, pastries that smelled divine. No note, no explanation, just more evidence of the invisible hands that ran this household. I dressed in jeans and a sweater from my limited belongings, my own clothes feeling like armor against this new world, and ventured out into the hallway. The house was eerily quiet, my footsteps echoing on marble floors as I explored. I found the library by accident, drawn by an open door that revealed floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in multiple languages. It was the first room that felt remotely welcoming, less like a showpiece, and more like a space meant to be used. I pulled out a book at random, Jane Eyre, appropriately enough, and settled into a leather armchair by the window. The gardens outside were beautiful in the morning light, precisely manicured, dotted with statuary and fountains. That's where Mrs. Caruso found me an hour later. She was perhaps 60, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a neat bun, and a warmth that seemed out of place in Sebastian's cold world. "Mrs. Russo," she said, her Italian accent making my new name sound almost musical. "I'm so glad to see you're settling in. I'm Elena Caruso. I manage the household. Please, call me Sienna," I said, desperate for some connection to my old self. She smiled gently. "If you prefer. Mr. Russo asked me to show you around the estate once you'd rested. Help you get oriented." Mr. Russo? He had a name here, a presence, rules and routines that governed this world I'd been thrust into. Mrs. Caruso gave me a thorough tour, her commentary mixing practical information with gentle observations. The formal dining room where Sebastian occasionally entertained business associates. The informal kitchen where I was welcome to take my meals. Mr. Russo rarely eats here, so you'll likely have it to yourself. The gym with equipment I didn't know how to use. The pool, the gardens, the library I'd already discovered. "And Mr. Russo's wing is off limits," she said as we passed a hallway I hadn't explored, her tone apologetic but firm. "He values his privacy quite highly." The message was clear. I had my space. He had his, and never the two shall meet. Days blurred into weeks after that. I existed in a strange limbo, living in luxury, but utterly alone. Sebastian was a ghost in his own house. I'd catch glimpses of him occasionally, through windows as he met with his men in the garden, their conversations animated and serious, or passing in the hallway late at night, both of us pretending not to see each other. Once, I heard his voice from behind the closed door of his office, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded angry. But he never spoke to me. Never acknowledged my existence beyond the absolute minimum required. I was a wife in name only, a ghost haunting the edges of his life. I spent my days reading in the library, losing myself in stories where women had agency and men weren't monsters. Or walking the gardens with Mrs. Caruso, who seemed to understand my loneliness without me having to voice it. She'd tell me stories about the plants, about the history of the estate, filling the silence with gentle kindness. Mr. Russo bought this property 5 years ago, she explained one afternoon as we strolled past rose bushes, heavy with late-season blooms. It had been abandoned for years, falling apart. He restored it completely, every detail personally supervised. Why? I asked. Why put so much effort into a house he barely seems to live in? Mrs. Caruso's expression was knowing. Because he understands the value of a fortress, Kara. Of having a place that's truly secure. Mr. Russo's life. It requires certain precautions. I thought about the armed guards, the security cameras, the walls. You mean because he's a criminal? She didn't flinch at my bluntness. I mean because he has enemies. Whether you approve of his business or not, he protects those under his roof, absolutely. You're safer here than you'd be anywhere else in this city. Safe. The word felt hollow. Yes, I was physically protected. But emotionally? Mentally? I was dying a little more each day, my sense of self eroding with every hour of being ignored, of being nothing. It was exactly 1 month after our wedding. I knew because Mrs. Caruso had mentioned it that morning with careful cheer, when everything changed. I was in the library again. It had become my sanctuary, curled in my favorite chair by the window with a book I wasn't really reading. The afternoon sun slanted through the glass, warm on my face. Outside, I could see Sebastian in the garden with Marco and Angelo, their postures tense, clearly discussing something serious. Then I heard voices from the hallway. Sebastian and Marco, speaking in English for once, their conversation carrying through the partially open library door. The Marchetti situation is escalating, Marco was saying, his voice tight with concern. Victor's making moves we can't ignore anymore. He's been asking questions about your marriage, about the girl. Let him ask, Sebastian replied, his voice cold and controlled. He's testing boundaries, trying to find weaknesses. When he crosses the line, we'll respond appropriately. And Mrs. Russo? Marco asked. Should we increase security around her? Victor's men have been spotted near the perimeter 3 times this week. If he's gathering intelligence... Why? Sebastian interrupted, and I heard something dangerous in his tone. She's nothing. A debt paid, a transaction completed. Victor can watch her all he wants. She holds no value. She means nothing to me. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat frozen in my chair, the book slipping from my numb fingers and hitting the floor with a soft thud that sounded deafening in my ears. She means nothing to me. I'd known, of course. Known from the moment he'd kissed me at the altar with all the warmth of a business transaction. Known from every ignored day, every silent meal, every night I slept alone in my beautiful prison while he remained in his private wing. But hearing him say it out loud, with such casual dismissal, broke something inside me that I hadn't realized was still whole. Some small, foolish part of me that had hoped, stupidly, desperately, that maybe eventually he'd see me as more than an obligation, that maybe someday I'd matter. I waited until their footsteps faded down the hallway before allowing myself to move, to breathe, to feel the full weight of my reality crushing down on me like a physical thing. I was nothing, would always be nothing to him. A wife in name only, living in a golden cage built by a man who couldn't even pretend to care. The realization settled over me like a shroud, suffocating and final. This was my life now. Forever. The days following that overheard conversation felt different somehow. As though hearing Sebastian's dismissal spoken aloud had crystallized something inside me, turning my vague unhappiness into something sharper, more defined. I was angry, I realized. Furious, actually, beneath the layers of resignation and grief. I'd been sold like property, yes, But I'd also been trying, in my own way, to make this work. To be the quiet, obedient wife Sebastian's rules demanded. And for what? To be nothing. To mean nothing. To exist in this beautiful prison completely alone. The anger felt good, better than the numbness I'd been drowning in. It gave me energy, purpose. I stopped eating in my room, started taking meals in the kitchen where Mrs. Caruso could see my rebellion in the form of barely touched plates. I stopped bothering to dress nicely, wearing the same jeans and sweater combination until Mrs. Caruso gently suggested laundry. "Are you all right, Kara?" she asked one morning, her eyes concerned as she watched me push eggs around my plate. "You seem troubled." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just adjusting. It's been over a month. If you're still adjusting, perhaps you need to try a different approach." I looked up at her, catching something knowing in her expression. "What do you mean?" She sat down across from me, which she'd never done before, some invisible line of employer-employee that she was crossing deliberately. "Mr. Russo is not an easy man to understand," she said carefully. "He has his ways, his reasons. But he's not cruel, Sienna. Not to those under his protection. Being ignored isn't cruel." "Is that what's happening?" She tilted her head. "Or is he giving you space to settle in? Time to adjust to this world before he demands more of you?" "He said I mean nothing to him," I admitted, the words bitter. "I overheard him telling Marco that I'm just a debt paid. A transaction. How is that not cruel?" Mrs. Caruso's expression softened with understanding, and something else. Pity, maybe. "Men like Mr. Russo don't show their hearts easily, Kara. They can't afford to. Every feeling is a weakness in their world. Every attachment a vulnerability their enemies can exploit. So he'll just pretend I don't exist forever. That's not a marriage. It's not even a life." "Then perhaps," she said gently, "you need to make yourself impossible to ignore." Before I could ask what she meant, Marco appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression urgent in a way that made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Russo, you need to come with me now." The tone left no room for argument. I followed him through the house to Sebastian's office, that forbidden wing I'd been told to avoid. Marco knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. Sebastian stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. When he saw me, his gray eyes widened fractionally, the first real reaction I'd seen from him in weeks. He ended the call abruptly. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a leather chair facing his desk. I sat, my heart pounding. Marco positioned himself by the door, his hand resting on something beneath his jacket. A gun, I realized. He was armed. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Sebastian rounded the desk, leaning against it, arms crossed. Up close, I could see tension in the set of his shoulders, a muscle ticking in his jaw. Whatever had happened, it had shaken even his legendary control. "Victor Marchetti's men were spotted on the estate grounds last night," he said without preamble. "They'd disabled 2 of our perimeter cameras and breached the outer wall before our patrol found them." Ice flooded my veins. "Were they coming for me?" "We don't know. They retreated when discovered. But Marco intercepted communications that suggest Victor has been planning something involving you for weeks. Your daily routines, your walks with Mrs. Caruso, your preferences. Everything. Why would he care about me? You said yourself I'm nothing, that I hold no value." "I know what I said." Sebastian's voice went hard. "I said it because I needed everyone to believe it. Needed Victor to believe it. But he's not as stupid as I'd hoped." "I don't understand." He pushed off the desk, pacing to the window with barely controlled energy. I'd never seen him this agitated, this visibly affected. It was frightening and oddly humanizing at the same time. Men like Victor Marchetti don't just want territory or money, he said, staring out at the grounds where armed men now patrolled in pairs. They want power, dominance. They look for weaknesses in their enemies and exploit them without mercy. 6 weeks ago, when we married, Victor started watching, testing, trying to determine if you mattered to me. And you made sure everyone thought I didn't. Yes. He turned to face me. I kept my distance, ignored you, treated you like you were nothing, all to protect you from becoming a target. Well, it didn't work, I said bitterly. He's watching anyway, planning anyway, so you made me miserable for nothing. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration. I made you safe. Or I tried to. The alternative was making you so visible, so obviously valuable that Victor would never dare touch you. But that required... He stopped, jaw tightening. Required what? Making it real. The word seemed to cost him something. Making everyone believe you're not just my wife in name, that you're mine in every way, that touching you would start a war he can't win. My heart raced. You want to pretend I matter? I want to make it so convincing that he never questions it. Sebastian crossed to me, crouching down so we were eye level. This close, I could see flecks of darker gray in his irises. Could smell his cologne and something underneath. Soap and skin and masculine warmth. Starting tonight, you move into my wing. We share a bedroom. In public and in private, you're not just Mrs. Russo. You're my wife in every sense. You can't be serious. I'm deadly serious, Sienna. His hand came up, cupping my face with unexpected gentleness. The first time he'd touched me since our wedding day. Victor is dangerous, unpredictable. If he thinks taking you would hurt me, he'll try. The only way to protect you now is to make it absolutely clear that you're precious to me, that losing you would destroy me, that anyone who harms you signs their own death warrant. By pretending? His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I felt heat bloom under my skin at the simple touch. Who says it's pretending? I jerked back, confusion and anger warring inside me. You've ignored me for 6 weeks. Told your men I mean nothing. Made it abundantly clear I'm an unwanted obligation. Now suddenly you care? I've always cared. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did me. Why do you think I stayed away, Sienna? You're right. I resent this marriage. Not because of you, but because your father put you in this position. Because I agreed to it knowing I'd bring you into danger. Because every day you're in my life, you're at risk. Then let me go, I whispered, even though I knew it was impossible. I can't. His voice was raw, unguarded in a way I'd never heard. The agreement with your father is binding. Breaking it would show weakness my enemies would exploit. And now that Victor's made his interest known, letting you go would be signing your death warrant. At least here, I can protect you. By making me more visible, more valuable. How does that protect me? Because men like Victor understand power and fear. Sebastian stood, pulling me up with him. They respect strength. If he believes you're truly mine, that you're precious to me, he won't risk the war it would start. But he has to believe it completely, which means we both have to sell it convincingly. I stared at him, seeing determination in those gray eyes, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe, or longing. I don't know how to pretend to care about someone who's been treating me like I'm invisible, I said. Then don't pretend. His hand settled on my waist, drawing me closer until I could feel his body heat through our clothes. Just let me protect you the way I should have from the beginning. By making you so valuable that losing you would end me. By making everyone believe that you're the most important thing in my world. Would it? The question slipped out before I could stop it. End you? Instead of answering, he kissed me. Not like at our wedding, brief and emotionless. This was different. Fierce and possessive and hungry, like he'd been holding back for weeks and finally couldn't anymore. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head to deepen the kiss. And I felt myself melting against him despite my anger, despite everything. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "Pack your things," he said, his voice rough. "You're moving into my room tonight. Tomorrow, we start showing the world what Mrs. Sebastian Russo really means to me." That night, I stood in Sebastian's bedroom, our bedroom now, with a suitcase I'd hastily packed. The space was masculine and imposing. Dark furniture, charcoal walls, a massive bed that dominated the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, now patrolled by twice as many guards as before. Sebastian emerged from the ensuite bathroom wearing only black silk pajama pants, his chest bare. I'd caught glimpses of him before, through windows, in passing. But this intimate proximity stole my breath. He was built like someone who understood violence intimately. Broad shoulders, defined chest and abs, arms corded with muscle. A scar ran along his ribs that looked like it had come from a knife. Another crossed his left shoulder, evidence of a life lived dangerously. "You can have the bathroom," he said, seemingly unaffected by my presence or his own half-naked state. "I'll take the left side of the bed. You take the right. We're actually sharing a bed." "That's generally what married couples do, Sienna." There was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Don't worry. I'll keep my hands to myself unless we have an audience who needs convincing." The casual way he said it, like touching me would be a chore performed for strategic benefit, stung more than it should have. I retreated to the bathroom, changed into simple cotton pajamas that suddenly felt inadequate, then emerged to find Sebastian already in bed, reading something on his tablet. I climbed into my side of the bed, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. The mattress was soft, the sheets expensive, and Sebastian was right there, close enough to touch, his body heat radiating across the small space between us. "Good night, Sienna," he said, setting aside his tablet and turning off the lamp. "Good night," I whispered into the sudden darkness. I lay awake for what felt like hours, listening to his breathing eventually even out into sleep. This man who was my husband but a stranger. This man who'd ignored me for weeks and now claimed to be protecting me by making me invaluable. I didn't trust him. Couldn't afford to trust him. But as I finally drifted towards sleep, I found myself hoping, desperately, foolishly, that maybe some small part of what he'd said was true. That maybe I could matter to him. That maybe this marriage could become something more than a cold transaction. The next morning, I woke to find Sebastian already awake, propped on one elbow, watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Good morning," he said, his voice rougher than usual, deep with sleep. "Morning," I managed. "We have breakfast with Marco and Angelo in an hour. I had Mrs. Caruso bring you some options to wear. Choose something that makes a statement." I found 3 dresses laid out in the closet, designer labels I recognized from magazines. I chose a deep blue sheath dress that hugged my curves while remaining elegant. When I emerged from the bathroom, Sebastian was waiting in a navy suit that emphasized his powerful build. His eyes traveled over me slowly, thoroughly, and I saw appreciation there. Hunger, even. "Perfect," he said, his voice low. Then he crossed to me and did something unexpected. He reached out and gently fixed a strand of my hair that had fallen across my face, his fingers lingering on my cheek. "Every man who sees you will want you today, Sienna. And I'm going to enjoy making sure they all know you're mine." "Am I?" I asked quietly. "Yours?" Instead of answering, he took my hand, lacing our fingers together, and led me downstairs to breakfast. Breakfast with Marco and Angelo was unlike anything I'd experienced in the 6 weeks I'd been living in Sebastian's house. The formal dining room felt different somehow. less like a museum piece, and more like a stage where something important was being performed. Sebastian pulled out my chair himself, his hand lingering on my shoulder as I sat. Then he took the seat beside me rather than at the head of the table, close enough that our arms brushed when he reached for his coffee. Every movement was deliberate, calculated to send a message. Marco and Angelo were already seated, their expressions carefully neutral as they watched this new dynamic unfold. I caught Marco's eyes flickering to where Sebastian's hand rested on my thigh beneath the table, possessive and unmistakable. "Gentlemen," Sebastian said, his voice carrying the authority I'd only heard him use with his men. "I trust you've both received the security update regarding Mrs. Russo." "We have," Marco confirmed, his gaze shifting between us. "Additional measures are being implemented as we speak. 8 more men on rotation, upgraded surveillance systems, and we've established a secure perimeter 3 blocks out from the estate." "Good." Sebastian's fingers tightened on my leg, and I had to suppress a shiver at the possessive gesture. "I want it known throughout the organization. Sienna is not just my wife in name. She is mine, under my absolute protection. Anyone who threatens her, watches her, or even speaks about her without respect, answers to me personally." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I'd heard Sebastian sound cold before, but this was different. This was lethal promise wrapped in velvet words. "Understood, boss," Angelo said, his sharp eyes assessing me with new interest. "We'll make sure the message is crystal clear. No ambiguity." "There's already been ambiguity," Sebastian replied, his jaw tightening. "That's why we're in this situation. Victor Marchetti thought he could test me by targeting Sienna because I made the mistake of keeping her 2 separate. That ends now." He turned to me then, and I saw something fierce in his gray eyes. In front of his most trusted men, with no real audience to convince, he lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my knuckles that felt far too real to be performance. "From this moment forward," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine, "everyone will see what Sienna means to me. There will be no doubt, no question. She is precious, irreplaceable, the most valuable thing in my world." My breath caught. The words were for his men, I reminded myself. Strategy, protection. But the way he looked at me when he said them made my heart race with something dangerous and foolish. The rest of breakfast passed in discussion of business I was now apparently meant to hear. Territory disputes. Shipment schedules. A problem with someone named DeMarco who was encroaching on our interests in the port district. But throughout it all, Sebastian maintained physical contact, his hand on my knee, his arm around my shoulders, his fingers playing with my hair in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. When Marco and Angelo finally left, I expected Sebastian to immediately drop the act, to return to the cold distance I'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night," he said. "Every family in the city will be there, including the Marchettis." My stomach dropped. "You want me to go?" "I want you beside me, showing everyone that you're not some neglected wife I keep hidden away. You're my partner, my queen." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising tenderness. "Can you do that? Can you stand beside me in a room full of people who'll be watching, judging, calculating?" I thought about Victor Marchetti, somewhere out there planning God knew what. About 6 weeks of being invisible, of being nothing. About finally having a chance to matter, even if it was just for show. "Yes," I said, more confidently than I felt. "I can do that." His smile was slow and genuinely pleased. "Good, because tomorrow night, we make sure Victor Marchetti, and everyone else in this city, understands exactly what it would cost to touch you." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of preparation that made me dizzy. Mrs. Caruso orchestrated everything with the precision of a general planning a military campaign. A stylist arrived to consult on my hair. A makeup artist came with cases full of products I'd never heard of, and a dress was delivered. Custom made, apparently, though I'd never been measured. Mr. Russo had your sizes from your existing wardrobe, Mrs. Caruso explained when I asked. He's very thorough about details. The dress was stunning. Midnight blue silk that deepened the color of my eyes, with a fitted bodice that emphasized curves I usually tried to hide, and a flowing skirt that moved like water. Delicate crystal beading along the neckline caught the light with every breath. When I finally saw myself in the full-length mirror, styled and made up and dressed in that incredible gown, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked powerful, confident, like someone who belonged at Sebastian Russo's side. Bellissima, Mrs. Caruso breathed, her eyes misting. You look like a queen, cara mia. A knock at the door made us both turn. Sebastian entered, and the expression on his face when he saw me made my pulse stutter. His eyes went wide, then dark with something that looked like hunger, raw and undisguised. Leave us, he said to Mrs. Caruso, his voice rough. She disappeared quickly, closing the door with a soft click that felt deafening in the sudden silence. Sebastian crossed the room slowly, his gaze traveling over me with an intensity that made my skin heat. He was already dressed in a black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, his dark hair styled back, and he looked devastating, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. You're stunning, he said, when he finally stood before me. His hand came up to trace along my bare collarbone, the touch sending electricity racing through my veins. Every man at that gala is going to want you tonight. Every woman is going to hate you. And I'm going to enjoy every second of watching them realize you're mine. Am I? I asked, echoing my question from that morning. Yours? His hands framed my face, tilting it up. What do you think, Sienna? Then he kissed me. Not for show this time. There was no audience to convince. Just Sebastian and me and the heat building between us with frightening intensity. His kiss was possessive and demanding, his tongue sweeping into my mouth as his hands slid down to my waist, pulling me flush against him. I could feel every hard plane of his body against mine, could taste the coffee he'd had with lunch, could smell his cologne mixing with something essentially male. My hands fisted in his jacket, holding on as he kissed me like he was trying to brand me, claim me, make me his in truth, rather than just in name. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, his pupils blown wide with desire. We need to go, he said, his voice gravelly, before I forget why we're getting dressed up and decide to keep you here instead. The implication made heat pool low in my belly, but I managed to nod. The drive to the gala was charged with tension. Sebastian held my hand in the back of the SUV, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm that made coherent thought impossible. Every so often, his gaze would travel over me, my face, my throat, the curve of my breasts in the fitted bodice, and I'd see hunger flash in his eyes before he'd look away, jaw tight with control. Remember? He murmured as we approached the venue. You're my wife, my partner. You belong at my side. Anyone who suggests otherwise is wrong. The venue was a historic mansion that had been converted into an event space, all marble columns and glittering chandeliers. A red carpet led from the street to the entrance, lined with photographers whose cameras started flashing the moment our car pulled up. Sebastian emerged first, then turned to help me out with practiced gallantry. The moment I stood, his arm came around my waist, pulling me against his side in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. The cameras went wild. Mr. Russo! Voices called out. Who's your companion? This is my wife, Sebastian said, his voice carrying clearly. Sienna Russo. More flashes, more questions I couldn't make out over the chaos, but Sebastian just smiled, that dangerous smile, and guided me up the steps and through the entrance. Inside, The ballroom was magnificent. Hundreds of people in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, drinking champagne and engaging in the sophisticated warfare of high society. I recognized several faces from news reports: politicians, business moguls, people whose names carried weight, and criminals. So many criminals, all dressed up and playing at respectability. Sebastian's hand never left my body as we moved through the crowd. His palm at the small of my back, his fingers intertwined with mine, his arm around my shoulders. Each touch a claim, a declaration. Mine. People approached us constantly. Sebastian introduced me with obvious pride, watching with satisfaction as men's gazes lingered on me, and women's expressions tightened with jealousy. "Mrs. Russo," a silver-haired man said, his smile oily. "How delightful to finally meet you. Sebastian's been keeping you quite hidden." "Not anymore," Sebastian replied before I could speak, his voice carrying an edge. "Sienna prefers privacy, but she's agreed to step into the spotlight with me. I'm a lucky man." The way he said it, with genuine warmth in his voice, made something flutter in my chest. Was he acting? Or was some part of this real? We circulated for nearly an hour, Sebastian introducing me to an endless parade of powerful people. Politicians who smiled while making veiled threats. Businessmen who spoke in euphemisms about arrangements and understandings. Other family heads whose handshakes felt like sizing up potential enemies. And through it all, Sebastian kept me close, his touch constant and reassuring. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured during a rare moment alone. "Everyone here can see you're not just decoration. You're holding your own." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "I know." His hand cupped my face gently. "But you're brave anyway. That's what matters." Then his expression changed, going cold and hard. I followed his gaze to see a man approaching, perhaps Sebastian's age, with sharp features and predatory dark eyes that made my skin crawl. "Sebastian," the man said, his voice smooth. "How domestic you've become." "Victor." Sebastian's arm around me tightened protectively. "I wondered if you'd have the nerve to show your face tonight." "Victor Marchetti." The threat made flesh. He was handsome in a cruel way, dressed impeccably, and he moved with the confidence of someone who'd never truly feared consequences. His gaze traveled over me slowly, assessing, and I fought the urge to step behind Sebastian. "And this must be the mysterious Sienna," Victor continued, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I've heard so much about you. Sebastian's been quite protective of your privacy." "My wife values discretion," Sebastian said, his voice going dangerously soft. "As do I." Of course. Victor's eyes glittered with malice. Though I have to admit, I was surprised by the marriage. So sudden, so transactional. Your father's gambling debts, I believe, must have been quite substantial for you to be sold off like that. I felt Sebastian's entire body go rigid beside me, violence simmering just beneath his control. "Careful, Victor," he said quietly. "You're speaking about my wife. Am I wrong?" Victor's smile widened. "I've heard the circumstances were less than romantic. A business arrangement, a debt settled. She must feel quite special, knowing her father traded her like cattle to save his own skin." The words hit their mark, bringing up every insecurity I'd been trying to bury. But before I could respond, before Sebastian could react with the violence I saw building in him, I found my voice. "My father made his choices," I said, proud of how steady I sounded. "And I've made mine. I married Sebastian willingly. Whatever circumstances brought us together don't define what we've become." Victor's expression flickered with surprise. "And what have you become, Mrs. Russo?" I looked up at Sebastian, saw the fierce pride in his eyes, and felt something shift inside me. "Partners," I said. "Equals. Whatever you think you know about our marriage, you're wrong." Sebastian's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Well," Victor said after a moment, "how touching. I hope for your sake that Sebastian's feelings for you are as genuine as you seem to think. Men in our world can be quite pragmatic about their attachments." "Is there a point to this conversation, Victor?" Sebastian asked, his patience clearly exhausted. "Or are you just here to insult my wife?" "No insult intended." Victor's smile was predatory, simply expressing concern for a fellow member of our community. Beautiful young women like Sienna can be so vulnerable in this world. I'd hate to see anything happen to her. The threat was barely veiled. I felt Sebastian's control snap. He moved with frightening speed, his hand fisting in Victor's jacket, yanking him close enough that their faces were inches apart. Around us, people backed away, sensing violence about to erupt. "Listen very carefully," Sebastian said, his voice deadly quiet. "If you or any of your men come near my wife, if you so much as speak her name again, I will end you. Not quickly, not cleanly. I will make you beg for death long before I grant it. Do you understand?" Victor's eyes had gone wide, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his face. "You'd start a war over a woman?" "I'd burn this entire city to the ground for her," Sebastian replied. Then he released Victor with a shove that nearly sent him sprawling. "Stay away from what's mine." He turned to me, his expression softening instantly. "Let's dance." Still shaking from the confrontation, I let him lead me onto the dance floor. A waltz had begun, slow and romantic, and Sebastian pulled me into his arms with possessive tenderness. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said as we began to move. "Victor's a snake. He was trying to provoke me, to make me do something stupid. Did it work?" His smile was grim. "Almost, but threatening to kill him in the middle of a charity gala would have been counterproductive." We danced in silence for a moment, his body leading mine with unconscious grace. This close, I could feel his heart racing, could see the muscle ticking in his jaw as he fought for control. "Did you mean it?" I asked quietly. "What you said to Victor about burning the city down for me?" His gray eyes met mine, and I saw something raw and unguarded there. "Every word." "Why?" "6 weeks ago, you said I meant nothing." I lied. The admission seemed to cost him something. "I've been lying to everyone, including myself. The truth is, Sienna, you've mattered since the moment you walked down that aisle. I kept my distance because I thought it would keep you safe. But I was wrong. And now?" He pulled me closer, his hand splaying possessively across my lower back. "Now everyone will know the truth. You're mine. And I protect what's mine with everything I have." "I don't understand you," I whispered, my head spinning. "You're so hot and cold. One minute you're ignoring me, the next you're threatening to start wars over me." "I know." His forehead dropped to rest against mine, an intimate gesture that made my breath catch. "I'm not good at this, Sienna. At feelings, at relationships. My world doesn't allow for weakness, and caring about you is the biggest weakness I've ever had." "Caring about me?" "Yes." He pulled back enough to look into my eyes. "I care about you, more than I should, more than is smart or safe. You're supposed to be nothing, and instead you've become everything." The music swelled around us, romantic and bittersweet. Other couples danced nearby, but I barely saw them. All I could see was Sebastian, this dangerous, complicated man, looking at me like I was precious. "I don't know if I can trust you," I admitted. "I know." His hand came up to cup my face. "But I'm going to spend every day proving that you can, starting now, starting tonight." What happens tonight? His smile was slow and full of dark promise. Tonight, we stop pretending this is just for show. Tonight, you become my wife in truth. If you'll have me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sebastian. I want you, Sienna, he said, his voice rough with desire. I've wanted you since that first day. But I won't push. I won't take. If this happens, it's because you choose it. Because you want me too. I looked into those storm-gray eyes and saw truth there. Hunger and possessiveness. Yes, but also vulnerability. This powerful, dangerous man was offering himself to me, giving me the choice he'd never given me before. And God help me, I wanted him too. Take me home, I whispered. His eyes darkened with heat and promise. Yes. The ride back to the estate felt like it lasted both an eternity and mere seconds. Sebastian sat beside me in the back of the SUV, his hand possessively gripping my thigh, his thumb tracing maddening circles through the silk of my dress. The tension between us was suffocating, electric, the air thick with unspoken promises. Marco drove in focused silence, his eyes carefully avoiding the rearview mirror, while Luca sat rigid in the passenger seat. They knew. Of course they knew. The entire ballroom had known the moment Sebastian pulled me onto that dance floor and looked at me like I was the only thing that existed in his world. Tell me to stop, Sebastian murmured, his lips brushing my ear, sending shivers cascading down my spine. Tell me you've changed your mind, and we'll go back to separate rooms, separate lives. I'll wait as long as you need. I turned to look at him, seeing genuine uncertainty in those gray eyes that were usually so controlled. This powerful man who commanded an empire with ruthless efficiency was giving me the choice. The power. And somehow that made me want him more. Don't stop, I whispered, my hand finding his jaw, feeling the slight rasp of stubble beneath my palm. I don't want to go back to being nothing to you. I can't. His eyes darkened with heat and something else, relief maybe, or triumph. You were never nothing, Sienna. Never. I was just too much of a coward to admit what you were becoming to me. And what's that? Everything. The word was a growl, possessive and absolute. His hand slid higher on my thigh, his fingers finding bare skin where my dress had ridden up, and I gasped at the contact. You're everything I didn't know I needed. Everything I was trying not to want. The SUV finally pulled through the estate gates, and I'd never been more grateful for the privacy of high walls and armed guards. Marco brought the car to a stop at the front entrance, and Luca was out immediately, opening Sebastian's door with practiced efficiency. Sebastian emerged first, then turned to help me out, his hand steady and warm in mine. But the moment my feet touched the ground, his control visibly frayed. He swept me into his arms, one arm beneath my knees, the other supporting my back, lifting me effortlessly despite my startled gasp. Sebastian, I can walk. I know, he interrupted, already striding toward the entrance. But I've waited 6 weeks to carry my wife over the threshold properly. Let me have this. Something about the way he said it, rough with emotion and barely restrained desire, made my chest tight. This wasn't just about sex, I realized. This was about claiming, about making real what had only been legal before. He carried me through the marble foyer, past Mrs. Caruso, who smiled knowingly and discreetly disappeared down a hallway, up the sweeping staircase to his wing, our wing now. He didn't set me down until we were inside the bedroom with the door closed firmly behind us. The room was different than I remembered from the previous night. Someone, Mrs. Caruso undoubtedly, had lit candles that cast flickering shadows across the walls. The bed had been turned down, revealing dark silk sheets. Soft music played from hidden speakers, something classical and romantic that seemed designed for seduction. I told her to prepare the room this morning, Sebastian admitted, setting me gently on my feet, but keeping his hands on my waist. Before I knew if you'd say yes, hoping you would. Presumptuous, I said, but there was no heat in it. Optimistic. His hands slid up my sides, his thumbs brushing the underside of my breast through the silk dress, making me shiver. I'm a man who goes after what he wants, Sienna. And I want you. Have wanted you since you walked down that aisle looking terrified and beautiful, and so fucking brave. I wasn't brave. I was trapped. You were magnificent. His hands found the zipper at my back, lowering it with agonizing slowness. You held your head high even though you were scared. You said vows you didn't mean to a man you didn't know. You survived 6 weeks of my cruelty. It wasn't cruel, I interrupted. It was. Lonely. It was cruel, he insisted, the dress sliding off my shoulders to pool at my feet, leaving me in nothing but delicate lace undergarments and heels. His gaze traveled over me with hungry appreciation, and I fought the urge to cover myself. I made you feel invisible when all I wanted was to make you mine in every way. That was unforgivably cruel, and I'm going to spend tonight, and every night after, making it up to you. He stepped back, his eyes never leaving me as he shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket and began unbuttoning his shirt with deliberate slowness. Each button revealed more of his chest, tanned skin, defined muscles, scattered scars that told stories of violence survived. Your turn to watch, he said, his voice rough. I want you to see what's yours now, Sienna. Every scar, every flaw, every part of me that I've kept hidden. The shirt joined my dress on the floor. Then his hands went to his belt, and I couldn't look away as he removed the rest of his clothes with unhurried confidence. He was magnificent. All power and controlled strength. His body a weapon honed through years of surviving in a brutal world. But it was the vulnerability in his eyes that undid me. This man who could kill without hesitation, who commanded loyalty through fear and respect, was standing before me completely exposed, offering himself with no guarantees I wouldn't reject him. I closed the distance between us, my hands finding his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath my palm. I'm scared, I admitted. Of me? Of this. Of wanting you when I should probably hate you for buying me like property. Of feeling something real when this was supposed to be just a transaction. His hands framed my face with devastating gentleness. Then we're both scared, because I'm terrified of how much I want you, of how easily you could destroy me now that you matter this much. I don't want to destroy you. Then let me have you. His thumb traced my lower lip, his eyes dark with desire. Let me make you mine in truth. Let me show you what this marriage can be when we stop fighting it. I answered by pulling his mouth down to mine. The kiss was different than before. Slower, deeper, weighted with intention. His hands slid into my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss while his body pressed against mine. All heat and hard muscle, an unmistakable arousal. I felt myself melting, my earlier resistance crumbling beneath the onslaught of sensation. He walked me backward until my legs hit the bed, then lowered me onto the silk sheets with surprising tenderness. For a moment, he just looked at me, his gaze traveling over every inch of exposed skin with possessive appreciation. Beautiful, he murmured, his fingers tracing the lace edge of my bra. So fucking beautiful, and finally mine. Yours, I agreed, the word coming easier than I'd expected. What followed was acclaiming in every sense of the word. Sebastian worshipped my body with his hands and mouth, learning every curve, every sensitive spot, every sound that escaped my lips. He was demanding but attentive, pushing me higher and higher until I shattered in his arms, his name a prayer on my lips. When he finally moved over me, his body covering mine, his eyes held mine with fierce intensity. Last chance, Sienna. Once I do this, once we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely. I'm already yours, I whispered, wrapping my legs around his waist, pulling him closer. Make it real, Sebastian. Make me your wife in every way. He claimed me then with exquisite slowness, his forehead pressed against mine, his breath mingling with my gasps as our bodies joined for the first time. The sensation was overwhelming, fullness and connection and an intimacy that went beyond physical. I felt barriers crumbling inside me, walls I'd built around my heart tumbling down as he moved within me with controlled power. Mine, he growled against my throat, his pace increasing, driving deeper. Say it, Sienna. Say you're mine. Yours, I gasped, my nails digging into his shoulders as pleasure built impossibly higher. I'm yours, Sebastian. Only yours. He captured my mouth in a searing kiss as we both came apart, our bodies trembling together, sealed in the most primal way possible. For long moments after, we stayed joined, foreheads pressed together, hearts racing in sync. When he finally moved, it was only to gather me against his chest, tucking my head beneath his chin, his arms wrapped protectively around me. No regrets? He asked quietly, his voice rough with emotion. No regrets, I confirmed, pressing a kiss to his chest, feeling his heart still pounding. Should I have some? Most people would say we should have waited longer, built more trust, actually gotten to know each other before. He trailed off, his hand stroking down my spine. We can get to know each other now, I said, without walls between us. His arms tightened. I'd like that, getting to know my wife. The real Sienna, not the ghost I made you become. I lifted my head to look at him. Tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone. He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers playing with my hair. I was afraid of you from the beginning, he finally said. From the moment I saw you walking down that aisle, looking so brave despite your fear. I knew you had the power to undo me if I let you get too close. That's why I kept my distance. Not to protect you, to protect myself. The admission made my chest ache. And now? Now I've decided the risk is worth it. His hand cupped my face, tilting it up so he could see my eyes. You're worth it, Sienna. Worth the vulnerability, worth the danger, worth everything. I kissed him again, slower this time, sweeter. Your turn. Ask me something. Are you happy? The question was almost hesitant, as though he was afraid of my answer. Right now, in this moment, are you happy? I considered the question honestly. 6 weeks ago, I'd been miserable, invisible, lonely, grieving the life I'd lost. Tonight, in Sebastian's arms, claimed and cherished and finally seen, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Yes, I said, surprised by the truth of it. I'm happy. His smile was beautiful and rare, transforming his face from dangerous to simply gorgeous. Good. Because I plan to keep you this happy for the rest of our lives. We made love again, slower this time, learning each other's bodies with thorough attention. And then once more in the early hours of morning, Sebastian waking me with kisses that quickly turned heated, our joining urgent and desperate and perfect. When I finally woke to daylight streaming through the windows, I found Sebastian already awake, propped on one elbow, watching me with an expression so tender it made my breath catch. Good morning, wife, he said, his voice rough with sleep and satisfaction. Good morning, husband, I replied, testing out the word. It felt different now, real, like it actually meant something. He leaned down to kiss me, slow and deep and claiming. I've cleared my schedule for today. Thought we'd stay in bed, get to know each other better. All day. All day. His hand slid beneath the sheets, finding my bare skin, making me gasp. We have 6 weeks to make up for. I plan to be very thorough. I should have protested. Should have reminded him that he had an empire to run, enemies to watch, business that couldn't wait. But the way he touched me scattered all rational thought, and I found myself nodding instead. All day, I agreed breathlessly. We spent the morning exactly as he'd promised, in bed, exploring each other with hands and mouths and bodies that were learning to fit together perfectly. Between bouts of lovemaking, we talked. Real conversations about our pasts, our fears, our hopes. I told him about my mother's death, about how my father had changed after losing her, drowning his grief in alcohol and gambling until there was nothing left. About my abandoned dream of becoming a teacher, of making a difference in children's lives. He told me about growing up in his world, the violence he'd witnessed as a child, the brutality he'd been taught was strength, the moment he'd taken over from his father and tried to build something different. Not legitimate, perhaps, but more controlled, more strategic. I'm not a good man, Sienna, he said, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as we lay tangled together. I've done things that would horrify you, hurt people, killed people, built my power on blood and fear. I know, I said quietly. I'm not naive about what you are. Does it bother you, knowing what I'm capable of? I thought about it honestly. It should. It probably says something terrible about me that it doesn't. But I can separate what you do from who you are with me. You've been gentle, patient, protective. You gave me choice when you could have just taken. That matters more to me than your business. You make it sound almost noble. His laugh was bitter. It's not. My business destroys lives, Sienna, ruins families. The money that pays for this house, for your comfort, for everything. It comes from things that keep me awake some nights. Then why do it? Because it's the world I was born into, the empire I inherited. Walking away would show weakness, would start wars that would kill innocent people caught in the crossfire. So I control it. I make it as clean as I can. I try to minimize the damage while maintaining the power that keeps us safe. He looked at me, searching my face. Does that make sense? In a twisted way, yes. I pressed a kiss to his jaw. You're trying to be a good man in a bad world. That's more than most people in your position would do. You're too kind to me. Or maybe I'm just seeing parts of you no one else gets to see. He pulled me closer, burying his face in my hair. I want you to keep seeing those parts. I want to be that man with you, the one who's gentle and patient, who protects instead of destroys. Can you help me be that person, Sienna? I think you already are that person, I said. You just needed someone to see it. We fell asleep again in the early afternoon, exhausted and sated, and more connected than I'd ever thought possible with this man I'd married under such terrible circumstances. I woke to voices outside the bedroom door. Sebastian's hand was over my mouth before I could speak, his body tense with sudden alertness. Stay quiet, he whispered. Then louder, what is it? Marco's voice came through the door, urgent and strained. Boss, we have a situation. Victor made his move. We need you now. Sebastian was out of bed instantly, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. I'll be right there. He turned to me, his expression fierce. Stay in this room. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mrs. Caruso. Do you understand? Fear spiked through me. What's happening? Victor's testing me, seeing if last night changed anything. He cupped my face, kissing me hard and fast. It did. You're precious to me now, Sienna, which means you're in more danger than ever. Promise me you'll stay here. Stay safe. I promise." He kissed me once more, then was gone, the door closing behind him with a click that sounded like finality. I sat alone in the rumpled bed where we'd made love hours ago, hugging my knees to my chest, and tried not to think about what Victor Marchetti's move might be. Tried not to think about the fact that by becoming Sebastian's wife in truth, I'd just made myself the most valuable target in his world. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. I paced the bedroom, wrapped in Sebastian's robe that still smelled of his cologne, my heart racing with fear and frustration. Outside the door, I could hear movement, footsteps, urgent voices speaking in Italian, the sound of doors opening and closing throughout the house. Something was happening, something bad enough to pull Sebastian from our bed after the night we'd shared. I was debating whether to disobey his order and venture out when a soft knock made me jump. "Mrs. Russo?" Mrs. Caruso's voice, strained but recognizable. "It's Elena. May I come in?" I unlocked the door to find her standing there with a tray, coffee, fruit, toast, but her usually warm expression was tight with worry. "What's happening?" I asked, stepping aside to let her enter. She set the tray on the bedside table, her hands trembling slightly. "There was an incident at one of Mr. Russo's warehouses early this morning. A fire. The building was completely destroyed." My stomach dropped. "Was anyone hurt?" "2 of our men were inside. They're in the hospital now with serious burns." Her voice broke slightly. "One of them is Marco's younger brother, Tony. He's only 19. "Oh, God." I sank onto the edge of the bed. "And they think Victor did this?" Mrs. Caruso nodded grimly. "The fire was deliberately set. There's evidence of accelerant, and witnesses saw men in cars matching descriptions of Victor's crew leaving the area right before the blaze started. Why? Why attack Sebastian now? Because last night Mr. Russo made it very clear in front of every family in the city that you matter to him. That you're not just a transaction, but something precious." She sat beside me, taking my hand gently. "Victor sees that as weakness, Kara. He thinks hurting Sebastian's business, or worse, hurting you, will prove that Sebastian has gone soft. That love makes him vulnerable." The word love hung in the air between us. Was that what this was? Could you fall in love with someone you'd been forced to marry? Someone who'd ignored you for weeks before suddenly claiming you as his own? But remembering the way Sebastian had looked at me last night, the tenderness in his touch, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd admitted his fears. "Yes," I thought. "Maybe you could." "I need to see him," I said, standing abruptly. "He gave strict orders. I don't care." I moved to the closet, pulling out jeans and a sweater. "His men are hurt. He's dealing with threats from Victor. I'm not going to hide in here like I'm helpless." Mrs. Caruso watched me dress with an expression that might have been approval. "He's not going to like it. He'll survive." I pulled my hair into a ponytail and headed for the door. "Where is he?" "His office." "But Sienna..." She caught my arm gently. "Be prepared. When Mr. Russo is in this mode, dealing with business, handling threats, he's different, harder. You've only seen the man he is with you. His men see someone else entirely." I squared my shoulders. "Then it's time I saw all of him, isn't it?" The walk to Sebastian's office felt longer than it should have. I passed men I didn't recognize, more guards, more security, evidence of the fortress Sebastian was building around me. They nodded respectfully as I passed, but their eyes were wary, assessing. The door to his office was closed, but I could hear voices inside, Sebastian's, Marco's, and others I didn't recognize. I knocked once, firmly, then opened the door without waiting for permission. The conversation stopped abruptly. 6 men stood around Sebastian's desk, all turning to stare at me. Maps were spread across the surface, marked with locations I didn't understand. Phones and laptops were scattered among papers covered in notes and numbers. Sebastian's expression when he saw me was complex. Surprise, frustration, and something that might have been relief, all flashing across his face in quick succession. Sienna. His voice was controlled, giving nothing away. I told you to stay in the bedroom. I know what you told me. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. I also know that 2 of your men are in the hospital because Victor Marchetti is using me as an excuse to attack you. So I'm not going to hide while you deal with the consequences of making me matter to you. One of the men I didn't recognize let out a low whistle, quickly silenced by a look from Marco. Sebastian studied me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then, surprisingly, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Gentlemen, give us a moment. The men filed out, Marco giving me an approving nod as he passed. When the door closed behind them, Sebastian came around the desk, his expression unreadable. You disobeyed a direct order. Yes. I lifted my chin. Are you going to punish me for it? His hands framed my face, and I saw the tension in him, the control barely holding. I should. I gave that order to keep you safe. I'm safe here. This is your fortress, your stronghold. And I'm tired of being protected like I'm made of glass. I'm your wife, Sebastian. That means I stand with you, not hide from your world. Something shifted in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or acceptance. My world is dangerous, Sienna. What happened last night at the gala put a target on your back. Victor now knows exactly how to hurt me. Through you. Then we deal with it together. I covered his hands with mine. You told me last night I was your partner, your equal. Let me be that. Let me see all of you. Even the parts you think will scare me away. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. I could feel his heart racing, could sense the war inside him between the instinct to protect me and the desire to let me in completely. Victor burned one of my warehouses this morning, he said into my hair. It was a message, a warning that he can hit me whenever and wherever he wants. 2 of my men are critical condition because of it. Mrs. Caruso told me, I'm so sorry. He's escalating. Testing to see if caring about you has made me weak. If I'll hesitate to retaliate because I'm worried about putting you at risk. His arms tightened. He's right to question it. Because standing here with you in my arms, all I can think about is keeping you safe, even if it means showing restraint that could be seen as weakness. I pulled back to look at him. What would you do if I wasn't in the picture? If you didn't have to worry about me? His smile was cold, dangerous, the expression of the man Mrs. Caruso had warned me about. I'd burn 3 of his warehouses in response. I'd make it clear that hitting me comes with consequences he can't afford. Then do it. He shook his head. You don't understand. I understand that you can't show weakness in your world, that hesitating makes you a target. So don't hesitate, Sebastian. Do what you need to do. I can handle it. Can you? His eyes searched mine. Can you really handle knowing that the man you made love to last night is the same man who will order violence and destruction without blinking? That the hands that touched you so gently will make decisions that hurt people? I thought about it honestly. About the man who'd worshipped my body with such tenderness, and the crime boss who commanded fear and respect throughout the city. They were the same person. And somehow, I'd made peace with that. Yes, I said simply, because I trust that you'll never bring that violence home to me. That when you're with me, you're the man I saw last night. That's enough. He kissed me then, hard and possessive and grateful. When he pulled back, some of the tension had eased from his shoulders. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Probably not. I managed a small smile. but you're stuck with me anyway." A knock at the door interrupted us. Marco entered, his expression grim. "Boss, we have another problem. The hospital just called. Someone tried to get into Tony's room. Security stopped them, but they were asking specifically about him by name." Sebastian's entire body went rigid. "Victor. Looks like it. We've got 4 men stationed there now, but if he's willing to go after my injured men in a hospital, he's willing to go after anything." Sebastian's voice was ice. "He's declared war. What do you want us to do?" Sebastian was silent for a long moment, and I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Then he looked at me, and I saw him make a decision. "Call Don Salvatore. Request a sit-down with the other family heads, tonight if possible." His hand found mine, squeezing gently. "We're going to handle this the right way, through the proper channels. Victor's broken the rules by targeting injured men. The families won't stand for that." Marco nodded and left to make the calls. When we were alone again, Sebastian turned to me. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For reminding me that I don't have to choose between protecting you and maintaining my position. That I can do both if I'm smart about it." He pulled me close again. "The sit-down tonight. I want you there." I pulled back in surprise. "What? Why?" "Because you're my wife, my partner, and I want every family head in this city to see exactly what you mean to me. To understand that attacking you means attacking the Russo family directly." His expression was fierce. "Plus, you wanted to see all of me. This is part of it. The negotiations, the politics, the careful dance of power that keeps our world functioning. Will I be safe there? Absolutely. These sit-downs are sacred. Neutral ground where violence is forbidden. You'll be safer there than almost anywhere else." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "But it won't be comfortable. You'll hear things, see things that might change how you see me." "I can handle it," I said, with more confidence than I felt. His smile was slight but genuine. "I believe you can." The rest of the day passed in preparation. Mrs. Caruso brought me another dress, this one deep burgundy, elegant but understated. "For a sit-down, you want to look powerful but not flashy," she explained, respected but not threatening. As she helped me dress and style my hair into a sleek chignon, I found myself growing nervous. This would be my introduction to Sebastian's world beyond just being his wife. I'd be meeting the other crime families, watching negotiations happen, seeing the machinery of power that kept this brutal world functioning. "You'll do fine, Cara," Mrs. Caruso assured me, adding simple diamond earrings. "Just stay close to Mr. Russo, let him lead, and remember that you belong there. You're not just his wife. You're a Russo now. That name carries weight." By the time I was ready, Sebastian was waiting in the foyer, dressed in a dark suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual. His eyes traveled over me with approval and something hotter. "Beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "Ready, as I'll ever be." The venue for the sit-down was a private club in the heart of the city, the kind of place that didn't advertise, where membership was invitation only and discretion was absolute. We arrived to find several other cars already there, expensive vehicles with tinted windows and drivers who watched our approach with professional wariness. Inside, the decor was old-world elegance, dark wood paneling, leather furniture, oil paintings of Italian landscapes. A large round table had been set up in the main room, with chairs positioned precisely around it. Already seated were men I recognized from the gala, and others I didn't. The power brokers of the city's underworld. And across the table, looking smug and dangerous, was Victor Marchetti. Sebastian's hand tightened on mine as he led me to our seats. I could feel the attention of every man in the room, assessing me, calculating what my presence meant. Don Salvatore, the white-haired man who'd intervened at the gala, sat at the head of the table. He nodded to Sebastian with respect, his eyes kind when they touched on me. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice carrying authority despite his age. "We have serious matters to discuss. Sebastian, you called this meeting. The floor is yours." Sebastian stood, and I felt the power shift in the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of generations of authority. "Victor Marchetti has broken our laws," he said simply. "He attacked one of my warehouses, injuring 2 of my men, 1 critically. Then he attempted to reach those injured men in the hospital where they were vulnerable and under medical care. These actions violate every code we live by." Murmurs around the table. Victor's expression remained smug, but I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Furthermore," Sebastian continued, his hand finding my shoulder in a possessive gesture, "his actions were motivated not by legitimate business disputes, but by a personal vendetta against my wife. He's used my marriage, a sacred institution, as an excuse to violate our agreements and endanger innocent men." "Your wife?" Victor sneered. "A woman you bought to settle a debt? Please, don't pretend this is about sacred anything. You married her because you had to, and now you're trying to use her to make yourself seem more human, more sympathetic." Sebastian's hand tightened on my shoulder, but his voice remained controlled. "My reasons for marrying Sienna are irrelevant to this discussion. What matters is that you've used her as justification for breaking our laws, and that ends now." Don Salvatore looked at Victor expectantly. "Do you deny Sebastian's accusations?" Victor shrugged. "I deny nothing. His warehouse burned. Accidents happen. As for the hospital, I had legitimate business inquiring about the welfare of injured men. If Sebastian wants to interpret that as a threat, that's his paranoia speaking." "Legitimate business?" Marco stood, his voice hard with anger. "That was my brother in that hospital bed. Your men asked for him by name, tried to get into his room despite being told he wasn't receiving visitors. Don't insult our intelligence by calling that legitimate concern." The table erupted in conversation, different families taking sides. I sat quietly beside Sebastian, watching the dynamics play out, seeing the careful dance of alliances and obligations that governed this world. Then Victor made his mistake. Perhaps if Sebastian spent less time playing house with his purchased bride, and more time actually running his organization, he'd be able to protect his assets better. His eyes found mine, cold and calculating. Though I have to admit, she's lovely. I can see why you've gotten distracted. Makes me wonder what she'd be worth to someone willing to pay more than a gambling debt. The room went silent. Absolutely silent. Sebastian moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment he was seated beside me. The next he had Victor by the throat, slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack the wood paneling. "Say one more word about my wife," Sebastian snarled, his voice deadly quiet. "Give me one more reason, Victor. One more excuse to end you here and now." "Gentlemen," Don Salvatore's voice cracked through the tension. "This is neutral ground, sacred ground. Violence here is forbidden." Sebastian released Victor with visible effort, stepping back with his hands raised, but his eyes promised death. "You're right, Don Salvatore. My apologies." He turned back to the table, his control restored but his fury still palpable. "I propose a formal ruling. Victor Marchetti violated our codes by attacking injured men and threatening my wife. The punishment should fit the crime." Don Salvatore nodded slowly. "The families will vote. All in favor of censuring Victor Marchetti for his actions, raise your hand." One by one, hands went up around the table. Even some of Victor's usual allies sided against him. The violation was too clear, too egregious to overlook. "The motion carries," Don Salvatore declared. "Victor Marchetti, you are hereby censured. You will pay restitution to the injured men and their families. You will cease all hostile actions against Sebastian Russo and his interests. And you will publicly apologize for disrespecting Mrs. Russo. Failure to comply will result in your being declared an outlaw, outside our protection and fair game for anyone who wishes to move against you. Victor's face had gone white with rage, but he was cornered and he knew it. Fine, he bit out. I apologize for my comments about Mrs. Russo. Not to me, Sebastian said coldly. To her, directly. Every eye in the room turned to me. Victor's gaze met mine, and I saw hatred there, pure and undiluted. But I also saw defeat. Mrs. Russo, he said, the words clearly paining him. I apologize for my disrespectful comments. It won't happen again. I could have been gracious, could have accepted with a simple nod and let it end there. But I remembered the fear I'd felt, the way Sebastian had looked when he'd received news of the attack, the young man lying in a hospital bed because of this petty war. See that it doesn't, I said, my voice carrying clearly, because next time, my husband might not be so restrained. The corner of Sebastian's mouth lifted in approval. Around the table, I saw respect dawn in several faces. The meeting concluded shortly after. Sebastian and I left with his hand possessively at my back, his men falling into formation around us as we exited. That was brave, he said once we were in the car. Possibly foolish, but definitely brave. Was it the wrong thing to say? No. He pulled me close, kissing my temple. It was perfect. You showed strength, showed you're not someone to be dismissed or intimidated. The families will remember that. Good. I leaned into him, suddenly exhausted. Because I meant it. I won't let people disrespect you or your family. Our family. His arms tightened around me. Our family, he repeated, and I heard something wondering in his voice, as though the concept was still new to him. When we arrived home, I expected him to want to discuss the meeting, to debrief on what had happened. Instead, he led me straight to our bedroom and made love to me with an urgency that spoke of fear finally released, of tension finding outlet. Afterwards, as we lay tangled together, he pressed a hand to my stomach, his eyes distant. Someday, he said quietly, this will be more than just us. Someday, there'll be children. A real family, not just a marriage of convenience. My breath caught. I'd been trying not to think about that possibility, about the fact that we'd been intimate without precautions, that every time we came together, we were risking creating a life. Would you want that? I asked carefully. Children? With you? His eyes met mine, vulnerable and honest. Yes, I'd want that very much. I smiled, relief flooding through me. Good, because there's something I need to tell you. His expression shifted to concern. What? I've been feeling strange the past few days. Nauseous in the mornings, tired even though I'm sleeping well. And I'm late, several days late. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like wonder. You think you're pregnant? I don't know. Maybe. I was going to take a test, but then everything happened with Victor. I trailed off, watching his face for his reaction. For a long moment, he was utterly still. Then his hand spread possessively over my stomach, and his smile was brilliant and beautiful, and completely genuine. If you are, he said, his voice rough with emotion, if we've created a life together already. Sienna, you've just made me the happiest man alive. I kissed him, pouring all my feelings into it. Love and hope and terrified excitement. We should find out for sure, I murmured against his lips. Tomorrow, he promised. Tonight, I just want to hold you, and imagine our future. As I fell asleep in his arms, I thought about how much had changed in just 6 weeks. I'd gone from being nothing to being everything, from a purchased bride to a cherished wife, from invisible to invaluable, and now possibly from wife to mother. Whatever came next, whatever threats still lurked in the shadows, we'd face them together. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter, 3 pink lines screaming the truth I'd already suspected. Pregnant. 6 weeks into a real marriage, and I was carrying Sebastian Russo's child. My hand trembled as I picked up the test, staring at it like it might change if I looked long enough. Behind me, the bathroom door opened and Sebastian entered, his hair still wet from the shower, wearing only low-slung pajama pants. "Well?" His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the hope beneath it. I turned to face him, holding up the test. "We're having a baby." For a heartbeat, he was completely still. Then he crossed the space between us in 2 strides, sweeping me into his arms and spinning me around, his laugh pure and joyful in a way I'd never heard from him. "We're having a baby," he repeated, setting me down gently, reverently, his hands immediately going to my still flat stomach. "You're carrying my child, our child. Are you happy?" I asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy?" He cupped my face, and I saw tears in his eyes. Actual tears from this man who'd built an empire on being unbreakable. "Sienna, I've never been happier in my entire life. You've given me everything. A real marriage, a partnership, and now a family. An actual family." He kissed me then, tender and reverent, his hands cradling my face like I was something infinitely precious. When he pulled back, his expression was fierce with determination. "Nothing will touch you now," he promised. "Nothing will threaten you or our child. I'll burn this entire world down before I let anything happen to either of you." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of bliss. Sebastian was impossibly protective, hovering over me constantly, adjusting my schedule to reduce stress, hiring the best obstetrician in the city for regular checkups. He attended every appointment, his hand gripping mine as we watched the tiny, flickering heartbeat on the ultrasound screen. "Strong," the doctor said approvingly. "Good heart rate. Everything looks perfect for 8 weeks." Sebastian stared at the screen with wonder, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "That's our son," he murmured. "Or daughter," I reminded him. "Son," he insisted with a small smile. "I can feel it. He's going to be strong like his mother. Brave. Beautiful. Beautiful boys," I teased. "Beautiful like you." He kissed my temple. "I hope he has your eyes, your smile, your strength." The tenderness in his voice made my chest ache with love. This man who'd seemed so cold and untouchable 2 months ago was now planning our child's future with open vulnerability. But beneath the happiness, tension was building. Victor might have been censured by the families, forced to back off, but that didn't mean the threats had disappeared. Sebastian's men reported increased surveillance, unusual movement from other families who might be testing for weakness. "They're waiting to see if becoming a father makes you soft," Marco explained one evening as he briefed Sebastian in the office while I sat curled in a leather chair, supposedly reading but actually listening intently. "Let them wait," Sebastian replied. "I'm not soft. I'm focused. There's a difference." "Is there?" Marco's tone was careful. "Because you've turned down 3 opportunities to expand our territory in the past month. You've avoided confrontation when normally you'd push back. They're talking, boss. Saying the wife and baby have changed you." "They have," Sebastian said simply. "I have more to protect now. That doesn't make me weak. It makes me more dangerous. Because now I have everything to lose." I looked up to find him watching me, his gray eyes intense with feeling. The love there was unmistakable, undeniable. It also made him vulnerable. 3 days later, everything went to hell. I was in the library, reading one of the pregnancy books Sebastian had insisted on buying, when I heard shouting from somewhere in the house. Urgent voices, running footsteps, a crash that made the windows rattle. I stood, my hand instinctively going to my stomach, now slightly rounded at 12 weeks. The shouting grew louder, closer, then gunshots, sharp cracks that echoed through the house. Terror locked my muscles. The baby. I had to protect the baby. I ran for the door, intending to find somewhere safe to hide when it burst open. Angelo stood there, his face pale, blood splattered across his shirt. "Mrs. Russo, you need to come now. It's Sebastian." My heart stopped. What happened? Ambush in his office. Someone got past our security. He's been shot. The world tilted. Shot. Sebastian had been shot. I followed Angelo at a run, my hand pressed to my stomach, praying silently that my baby was okay, that I wasn't losing everything I'd just found. Sebastian's office was chaos. Marco was on the phone barking orders. 2 other men I didn't know were tending to Sebastian, who lay on the floor behind his desk, his shirt soaked with blood. "Sebastian!" I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands finding his face. His eyes were open, focused on me, but his breathing was labored. "Sienna." His hand found mine, gripping weakly. "The baby. You need to get somewhere safe." "I'm not leaving you." Tears streamed down my face. "Who did this? How did someone get in?" "Inside job," he rasped. "Someone we trusted. They knew the security codes, the shift changes. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Don't talk. Save your strength." I looked up at Marco desperately. "Where's the ambulance?" 5 minutes out. His expression was grim. "He's lost a lot of blood, Mrs. Russo. But he's strong. He'll make it." "He better," I said fiercely, turning back to Sebastian. "You hear that? You're going to make it. You're going to meet our son. You promised." His smile was weak but genuine. "Son, told you." Save the "I told you so's" for when you're not bleeding on your office floor. The ambulance arrived, paramedics rushing in with a stretcher and equipment. They worked with efficient speed, stabilizing Sebastian enough to transport. I tried to climb in the ambulance with him, but Marco stopped me. "They need space to work on him. I'll drive you. We'll be right behind them." I watched the ambulance pull away, sirens wailing, carrying the man I loved toward an uncertain fate. Then I turned to Marco, and something in me shifted. The fear transformed into cold, calculating fury. "Who did this?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Marco looked surprised by my tone. "We don't know yet, but we'll find out." "It was Angelo," I said with sudden certainty. "What?" "No. Angelo's been with us for 15 years. He's loyal. He was the one who came to get me. He knew exactly where I was, knew I'd be alone in the library. He was covered in blood, but had no visible injuries." I met Marco's eyes steadily. "And he called Sebastian by his first name when he told me what happened. Your men always call him Boss or Mr. Russo. Always. But Angelo used his name, like he'd forgotten to maintain the pretense." Marco's expression shifted to understanding, then cold rage. "Figlio di puttana. He's been working with Victor all along." "Where is he now?" "Probably trying to disappear before we figure it out." Marco pulled out his phone. "But he won't get far. We have eyes everywhere." "Good." I stood, brushing off my jeans with hands that had stopped shaking. "Find him. Bring him to me. I want to look him in the eyes when he tells me why he betrayed my husband." Marco stared at me with something like awe. "Mrs. Russo." My husband is fighting for his life because someone he trusted put a bullet in him. Someone who endangered not just Sebastian, but our unborn child. My voice was ice. Find Angelo. Now. The drive to the hospital was the longest of my life. Every red light felt like torture. Every minute that passed was another minute Sebastian could be slipping away. By the time we arrived, he was already in surgery. A doctor with kind eyes and exhausted features met us in the waiting room. "Mrs. Russo, I'm Dr. Chen. Your husband is in surgery now. The bullet entered his abdomen, missed major organs but caused significant internal bleeding. We're doing everything we can. But he'll live." I needed to hear it. Needed the certainty. He's strong and he got here quickly. Those are in his favor. But the next few hours are critical. Hours. I would have to wait hours not knowing if Sebastian would survive. If our child would grow up without a father. If I'd lose everything just when I'd learned how much it all meant to me. I sank into a plastic waiting room chair, my hand on my stomach, and prayed to a God I'd stopped believing in years ago. Marco sat beside me, his phone constantly buzzing with updates. We found Angelo trying to board a flight to Mexico. He's being brought to the safe house now. I want to talk to him. "Mrs. Russo, you should stay here. Sebastian is in surgery. There's nothing I can do here except wait." I stood, my jaw set with determination. "But I can do something about the man who put him there. I can make sure he pays." Marco studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "The boss would be proud of you right now. You're thinking like a Russo." "I am a Russo," I said simply. "And nobody hurts my family." The safe house was exactly what it sounded like. A nondescript building in an industrial area where Sebastian's men conducted business they didn't want public. Angelo was in the basement, tied to a chair, his face already bruised from resisting capture. He looked up when I entered, and I saw fear flash in his eyes. Good. He should be afraid. "Mrs. Russo, I can explain." "Shut up." I circled him slowly, my hands clasped behind my back. Marco and 2 other men stood by the door, watching. "You've been with Sebastian for 15 years. He trusted you, valued you, and you betrayed him for what? Money from Victor Marchetti? A promise of power? You don't understand. Sebastian's gone soft. A wife, a baby. It's made him weak. He's not the leader we need anymore." I moved faster than I knew I could, my hand cracking across his face with enough force to snap his head to the side. "My husband took a bullet today because of you. He's in surgery right now, fighting for his life. And you dare to call him weak?" Angelo spit blood. "He is weak. The old Sebastian would have eliminated Victor months ago, but he held back because of you. Because he was afraid of putting you at risk. That's weakness." "No," I said quietly. "That's love. That's having something worth protecting. Something worth living for. You wouldn't understand that because you're a coward who sold out the man who gave you everything." I turned to Marco. "Does Sebastian have a protocol for traitors?" "We make an example of them," Marco said coldly. "So no one else gets ideas about betrayal." "Then make an example of this one." I met Angelo's eyes without flinching. "And make sure everyone knows that the Russo family, all of us, protects our own." I left before I could see what Marco would do. Some things I didn't need to witness, even in my current state of cold fury. Back at the hospital, Dr. Chen was waiting with news. "Surgery went well. We've repaired the damage, stopped the bleeding. Mr. Russo is stable and being moved to recovery." Relief crashed through me so intensely I nearly collapsed. Marco caught my arm, steadying me. "Can I see him?" "He's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but yes, follow me." Sebastian looked pale against the white hospital sheets, tubes and monitors attached to him, but his chest rose and fell with steady breaths. I took the chair beside his bed, gathering his hand carefully in both of mine. You scared me, I whispered. I know you can't hear me, but you scared me so badly. I thought I was going to lose you, just when I'd figured out how much I love you. His fingers twitched in mine, and his eyes fluttered open. Sienna? I'm here. I leaned closer, tears streaming down my face. I'm here, and you're going to be okay, and our baby is fine. Angelo? His voice was rough. Handled. Marco's taking care of it. He won't hurt anyone ever again. Something that might have been satisfaction crossed his face. You did that? I'm a Russo, I said, echoing my words from earlier. I protect my family. His smile was weak but genuine. I love you, Sienna. Should have told you every day. Love you so much. I love you too. I kissed his forehead gently. Now rest. Heal. We have a baby to meet in 6 months. Sebastian's recovery was slow but steady. 2 days in the hospital, then 2 weeks of restricted activity at home. I barely left his side, monitoring his pain levels, making sure he followed doctor's orders, running interference when his men tried to involve him in business too early. You're worse than my actual doctor, he complained one afternoon as I physically removed his laptop from his reach. Your actual doctor didn't threaten to lock you in the bedroom if you don't rest. I kissed him to take the sting from my words. You were shot. Sebastian, you need time to heal. I'm healed enough. He pulled me carefully onto his lap, mindful of his still tender abdomen. And I've been thinking. About what happened with Angelo. How he said I'd gone soft. His hand found my growing belly, now obvious at 16 weeks. He was right in a way. I have changed. Having you, knowing about the baby, it's changed my priorities. Is that bad? No. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But it means I need to restructure how I do things. Pull back from the day-to-day violence, delegate more to Marco and the others. I want to be a father, Sienna. A real one. Present and involved, not a ghost who's always busy with business. My heart swelled. You mean that? Every word. He kissed me softly. You and our child are more important than any territory dispute or power play. I've spent my whole life building an empire. Now I want to actually live in it. With you. 6 months later, I went into labor 3 weeks early, terrifying Sebastian so thoroughly that he nearly crashed the car twice getting me to the hospital. Breathe, I gasped between contractions, gripping his hand. We're going to be fine. You're the one in labor, and you're comforting me, he said, his face pale. That seems backwards. Welcome to parenthood. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of Sebastian holding my hand, coaching my breathing, looking more terrified than I'd ever seen him face down actual threats. When our son finally arrived, screaming his fury at being forced into the cold world, Sebastian wept openly. He's perfect, he breathed, holding the tiny bundle with infinite gentleness. Sienna, he's absolutely perfect. I looked at my husband cradling our son. This man who'd been a stranger forced on me by circumstance, who'd ignored me and hurt me before finally letting me in. This man who'd taken a bullet protecting our family, who'd changed his entire life because fatherhood mattered more than power. Samuel, I said. Samuel Jr. after your grandfather. Sebastian's eyes met mine, wet with tears. After my grandfather who built the empire, and he'll be the one to transform it into something better. Samuel Jr., he repeated, looking down at our son. Sam, welcome to the world, little man. Sam had my dark blue eyes and Sebastian's strong features, already showing hints of the man he'd become. As I watched father and son together, I felt my heart overflow with love and gratitude. A year ago, I'd been sold to settle a debt. married to a man who'd called me nothing. Now I was a wife, a mother, the center of Sebastian Russo's world. The woman who'd proven that even the hardest hearts could be transformed by love. "I love you," Sebastian said, sitting carefully on the edge of my hospital bed, our son cradled between us. "You took a transaction and turned it into a family. You took a man who thought he was incapable of love and proved him wrong. You saved me, Sienna." "We saved each other," I corrected, leaning against his shoulder. "You gave me protection when I had nothing. I gave you something worth protecting. That's not one person saving another. That's partnership." He kissed my forehead, then Sam's. Partnership, family, love, everything I never thought I'd have. Looking at my husband and son, I knew that sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the darkest beginnings. Sometimes being sold could lead to being cherished. Sometimes arranged marriages became real love. And sometimes the man who bought you could become the man who valued you above everything else in his world. "Mrs. Russo," Sebastian murmured, his arms around both of us. "Thank you for making me human again." "Mr. Russo," I replied with a smile. "Thank you for making me matter." As Sam yawned and settled between us, I realized that I'd found what I'd been searching for all along. Not freedom from Sebastian Russo's world, but belonging within it. Not escape from my husband, but partnership with him. I'd been nothing, a debt paid, a transaction completed. Now I was everything. A wife, a mother, the woman who'd transformed a monster into a man, and a cold business arrangement into the deepest love either of us had ever known. And that, I thought as sleep finally claimed me, was worth every terrifying, beautiful moment of the journey that had brought us here.